some missions never truly end. The world believes the threat has passed, that the enemy has been defeated. But Steve had learned long ago that real danger doesn't disappear. It simply moves out of sight. Waiting. Rebuilding. Until it strikes again. New intelligence arrived before dawn. A scientist, Dr. Elias Voss, had vanished 3 weeks earlier. No ransom demand. No body. Just gone. Someone was erasing footprints. Steve recognized the pattern immediately. When people disappear without a trace, someone powerful wants something buried. And buried things are almost always the most dangerous. The orders were clear. Find Voss before the network did. The intelligence suggested he had escaped, barely. He carried something with him, data. Classified research that certain organizations would kill to suppress. Steve studied the maps. Micah studied Steve. They had done this before, they would do it again. There was no time for doubt. The window was closing, every hour Voss remained missing, the trail grew colder. Steve had learned not to wait for perfect conditions. The mission required movement, and movement required commitment. He loaded Micah into the helicopter and took his position. They touched down 3 kilometers from the target zone. Fast rope wasn't needed, the pier was clear. But clear didn't mean safe. Steve moved immediately, keeping low, Micah just ahead of him, nose working the darkness. The harbor smelled of diesel, salt, and something else. Something chemical, wrong. The harbor had been cleared, not abandoned, cleared. There is a difference. Abandoned places have accumulated disorder, litter, tools left behind, the residue of daily life. This place had been swept clean. Deliberately, recently, someone had prepared this location. And preparation meant expectation. Micah found it first, she always did. A scent trail, faint but unmistakable to her. She moved with purpose now, the loose searching replaced by a directed, precise advance. Steve read her body language like a language only they shared. She was tracking a human, recent, stressed. Moving fast. The container yard was a maze. 15,000 square meters of steel and shadow. A perfect place to hide someone, or to set a trap. Steve moved methodically, clearing angles, using the containers for cover. Micah ghosted at his side, reading the environment with senses Steve could only trust blindly. They were not alone. Steve sensed it before he could confirm it, a shift in the air, a feeling at the base of his neck that decades of operations had trained him never to ignore. Micah paused, looked up. That was confirmation enough. The contact broke and ran. That told Steve everything he needed to know. This was not a casual observer. Professionals hold position or engage, this one ran. Which meant information was more valuable than combat. They had found something, or something had found them. The man surrendered without a fight. That was the second tell. Not military, not a guard, he was terrified, genuinely afraid, of something other than Steve. He looked past them, back into the darkness of the container yard. Whatever was in there scared him far more than an armed operator and his dog. Behind the false wall was a safe house, improvised, barely functional, but deliberate. Someone had planned to be here. The laptop was military-grade, encrypted. The documents bore classification markings Steve recognized immediately. This was not random, this was an extraction point, and the person it was built for had not yet arrived. The files confirmed it. Facilities, each operating independently but feeding data to a central collection point. Someone had been building this for years. Quietly, patiently. And Dr. Voss had discovered exactly how deep it went. Experienced operators know the quality of silence. There is the silence of emptiness, nothing around, nothing coming. And there is the silence of held breath, every living thing in the area aware of a predator. This was the second kind. The air had changed, something was moving in the dark. They came from 3 directions at once. coordinated, professional. This was not a patrol stumbling onto an intruder, this was a prepared interception. Someone had been tracking Steve and Micah since before they touched down. The container yard had been a killing ground waiting to be activated. The container bought them seconds, not more. Steve assessed rapidly, 3 tangos confirmed, possibly more. Exfil route compromised. Comms were being jammed, they were cut off, deeper in the container yard than planned, with no immediate extraction option. Standard situation, adapt and move. The scientists' trail did not end here. The files pointed inland, to the mountains, to something buried beneath them. An old infrastructure project, repurposed. Whatever Shadow Protocol had built there was the real objective. The harbor was just the gateway. Steve folded the map, they needed to move. The mountains held their silence differently than the harbor. Here, the silence was natural, ancient, indifferent. No human construction shaped it. Steve moved through the tree line, keeping off the road, reading the landscape. Micah worked ahead, her nose constantly processing the cold mountain air. The entrance had been designed to look abandoned. It had not succeeded entirely. The concrete was too clean, the security conduit too new. Someone had spent significant resources here and then tried to make it invisible. The tire tracks in the mud told the rest of the story, this facility was active. They were inside when the alarm triggered. Not a perimeter alarm, an interior one. Someone had reset the motion grid deliberately. The tunnel had been allowed to seem passable, it was not. Steve and Micah were inside the structure now, and above them the entrance was sealing shut. This was Shadow Protocol, not a name on a document, but a physical reality. Thousands of servers, petabytes of data, collected over years. Medical research, surveillance, communication intercepts. All of it flowing into this buried nerve center. Someone had built an intelligence infrastructure that governments were not supposed to know existed. The research had happened here first. Before the servers, before the network infrastructure. Scientists had worked in this chamber, unaware of what their research would be used to build. Or perhaps some of them had known. Professor Voss had worked here, his handwriting was on the whiteboard equations. He had not left voluntarily. Micah's nose told a story that no map could. The scent trail descended. Voss was below them, further down, in a part of the facility that didn't appear on any of the documents. Someone had been careful to hide the lowest levels entirely. Which meant that was where the most critical elements were kept. The evacuation was orderly. That was the disturbing part. In a crisis, people leave things behind randomly. Here, the important equipment had been secured, data terminals locked, sensitive materials removed. Whoever ran this facility had time to execute a protocol, they had known someone was coming. Someone had warned them. Professor Voss was alive. Thinner than his file photo, eyes carrying the weight of weeks of enforced isolation, but alive, and alert. The first thing he said was not thank you or help me. The first thing he said was, they haven't found the second archive. That told Steve everything about the man's priorities, and the size of what they were dealing with. The alarm didn't come from their breach. It came from outside. Someone had triggered a remote activation, a dead man's switch, designed to execute if contact with the facility was lost. Or if someone had just given the order. The facility was going into lockdown. And somewhere above them, the exits were closing. Primary exit, sealed. Secondary route, flooded, water rising from a broken conduit below. The facility's automated systems were executing a containment protocol that was also, effectively, a death trap. Steve ran through the options rapidly. There was one remaining path, older infrastructure, below the current facility level. Dangerous, but possible. The lower tunnel was not on any blueprint. It was original construction, older than the facility above it, carved from the mountain itself. A natural water channel, reinforced over decades. It ran north, North meant the mountain's far side. North meant a way out that Shadow Protocol had not thought to seal, because they didn't know it existed. The sealing gave way at the worst possible moment, because in missions like this, there is no other moment. Steve covered Voss instinctively, taking debris across his back. For 3 seconds, Micah was on the other side of the collapse. 3 seconds in which Steve's entire world narrowed to a gap in the rubble. Then she was there, showing him the way, as she always did. The passage required one person to hold, one to move. Steve took the weight. He was stronger, more trained, and, though he would never say it, more expendable in this calculation. He told Voss to move, he told Voss not to stop, he did not tell Voss that he wasn't certain the structure would hold long enough for both of them. Micah came back. She always came back. Steve looked at her for one long moment, this dog who had chosen, entirely of her own will, to be on the wrong side of a collapsing tunnel because he was there. He didn't have words for what that meant. He never did. He just moved. And she moved with him. The shaft was an original construction access point, maintenance infrastructure from a time before the facility existed. The rungs were old, but the mountain rock around them was solid. Steve went first, testing each hold. Behind him, Micah began to climb. She had never failed to follow where he led. She was not going to start now. Above ground, the search was already underway. Not a panicked response, an organized sweep. They had protocols for this. Multiple teams, coordinated radio communication, a perimeter expanding outward from the facility entrance. Someone had anticipated an extraction attempt and prepared accordingly. They were out. Above the searchers, in terrain the tactical teams hadn't reached yet. The forest closed around them like an embrace, dark, cold, and for the moment, protective. Steve paused for exactly 3 seconds, confirming their position, verifying Micah's condition, checking his equipment. Then he moved. Into the trees. Comms were dark. The jamming extended to the surface. Someone had anticipated an aerial extraction and pre-deployed electronic countermeasures. The helicopter could not come to them. They would have to move to a secondary extraction point, further away, harder to reach. Voss was slowing, the search teams were spreading. The math was getting worse. The forest at night has its own logic. Without light, the other senses sharpen. Sound becomes navigation. Touch becomes information. Steve had operated in complete darkness enough times to move efficiently. Voss had not. The scientist was brave but untrained, stumbling, slowing. Steve adjusted their pace. They would make it, it would just take longer. They had anticipated the route. Of course they had. Steve was using terrain logic, and a competent opposing force would do the same. The choke point was unavoidable and preoccupied. Steve made the decision in less than 2 seconds. Speed and aggression, not stealth. Micah read his intention before he gave the command. She was already moving. 30 seconds of controlled violence. Steve moved through the ambush position like a force of nature, not recklessly, but with the absolute decisiveness that separates trained operators from everyone else. Micah created confusion on the flanks. Voss ran, and then they were through, beyond the perimeter. Into open terrain. Professor Voss looked at Steve from the vehicle door. He wanted to say something, Steve could see it. The scientist had the particular expression of a man who has processed an enormous truth and is searching for words proportional to it. Steve waited. Finally Voss said, "Shadow Protocol is not one organization. It is a network, hundreds of nodes. On every continent. It has been building for 15 years, and whoever controls it, they know we have Voss now. The mission had ended, the war had not. Shadow Protocol was real, it was vast, and somewhere in its network, an alarm had just been triggered, an alarm that said, Voss has been recovered. That meant Steve and Micah would be targets now. Not for one organization. For a network, hundreds of nodes. On every continent." Steve looked down at Micah. She looked up at him. They had done impossible things before, they would do them again. The mission ends. The next one begins.